I am Dr. Mahammad Rafi, Department of Cybersecurity, Associate Professor at Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I want to discuss about the computer network subject, in which the topic is a switching. Outcomes of the switching. Generally, switches which is using the media access control address tables to direct data or the frames to the correct destination port. Switches which is reducing the network other collisions and which will be enhancing the overall performance of unnecessary traffics and improving the network efficiency. So this is the outcome of the switches. Switching. In a computer network, switching is nothing but the process of transforming the data packets from one device to another in a network. That means with help of these other switches now, we can transferring the data, or we can transferring the information from one device to the another other device over the same network or different networks. We may be transferring the data to different networks or same network, or from one network to the another network. That means a private network to the public networks. Using the specific device, it is called as a switches. That's why a switch is a hardware device in a network that connecting the other devices like the computers, any other computer devices or any servers. So it helps the multiple devices that shares the data, that shares the information. Now which is connecting the switch, whatever the switch is there, that switch can be connected switch. This is a switch as it can be connected to the multiple other devices. And here multiple other devices. Now through these other switches, the data can be shared from device 1 to device other 2. That means the data will be shareable, or information will be shareable with supporting of the switches. Now we can share the data. So over the network, or same network, or from one network to the another other networks. Now we may utilize the same network. Via the other same network, we can transfer the data, or one network to the another network. Now we can transfer the data or information. So that means without their other data interference with each other, without interference, now with help of these switches, directly we can transferring the other data from one device to the another device. For transferring the data from one device to another device, here the port number is required of the network. The IP address and the port number is required. With help of this the IP address and port number of the particular network, now the data can be transferred efficiently and effectively from one device to the another device. Here, how does it the network switching works over the network? That means now the switching, the network switch. So these are the network switch now, which is the sending the information from through via the router from the computer device, whatever from the computer device, now through this network, now via the routers and the switches, the data can be transferred to the different devices. So that it may be transferred to the mobile phone device, or it may transfer to the printer, or it may transfer to the server, or it may transfer to the desktop computer, that is a personal computers, or laptop, or gaming console. Any device now, the data can be transferred over the network other switches from one device to the another other device, or one network to the another other network. The data will be transferred like this. Now the switches can be work. Here is Switching in a computer network. Introduction to switching. Switching in a computer network generally, which is managing how data is transferred directly through the network. That means now which is the switching, now which is the mapping, which is mapping the other devices from one device to the another device. By mapping the other devices, these other switches can be the transfers the data. The best example for the data transmission is a multicasting can be utilized. In a multicasting, the switches can be utilized. Here is the multicasting, the sender, the mission now, which is sending the information through these switches to the receiver device. That means identified, whatever the device is identified. Suppose if it is device 1, device 2, device 3, and device 4, device 5, device 6. So here from this device 7, that is a destination, that is a sender, source to the that identified the device. For that the identified the device, now the data can be transferred. For transferring the data to the identified the device, now require the IP address of the destination, same as the along with port number. Along with the port number, the IP address also are required. So here it is enables the efficient the communication. So by determining the best the path from data to traveling from the sender to the receiver. Traveling the data can be transferred over the switches by connecting the switches. Multiple, now we can transferring the data from one sender to the multiple resources, now multiple other devices, we can transfer the other data. So this is the switching. The switching can be utilized like this. Now which is the switching, now whatever the switching concepts now we are doing, so which is enables the efficient the communication by determining the best the path for the data to traveling from the sender to the receiver. Sender to receiver, now with help of these the switches, now best the path. Switches and routers now with the supporting of the routers and switches, now best path can be identified. Best path means now shortest distance can be identified. Over this the shortest distance, the data transmissions can be done. Here switches, the definition of the switches are network devices that connect the multiple devices on a local area network, and these are the switches now which using the MAC address, that is a media access control address, to forwarding the data to the correct destination. Correct destination means now whatever the destination now we are going to the transferring from the source, now identified the destination. The destination can be identified. How we are going to identifying the destination? With help of the IP address. With help of this the IP address and the port number of the network, now we can identify the destination. By identifying the destination, the data can be transferred. Here is switches which operates at the data link layer. Generally the switching the technology can be used at the data link layer level of the OSI reference model. So using this MAC address, that is a media access control address, to directly transferring to the appropriate port. So that means now with help of this the MAC address, now so number of other networks, this is the network 1, and this is the another network 2, network 3, number of other networks. Now each and every having the port number. Now this network having the port number is a 1024. This network having the port number is a some 1034. This network having the port number 1057. 1057 is the port number of this other network. That means here in this the port, in this the network, number of other devices can be arranged. Here also arrange the number of other devices. Number of other devices can be arranged. Here also now you can arrange the number of other devices can be arranged. That means with MAC address now with the supporting of this the MAC address now to directly framing appropriate the port number. Now directly now we are framing this the port number 1024 to the 1034. 1024 to 1034 the port number, it will be the directly the framing. Directly now the same by framing these the networks now we can transferring the data. So for the transferring the data now we are using the data link layer or the data link layer. Data link layer now the data can be transferred. Here is this is the function. And MAC address at the table. Generally this media the access the control. This is the table now which is maintained by the switch that map the MAC address to the specific the port number. Here is number of the port numbers. Here it is the number of the port numbers. Port number 1024 and 1034, 1057 number of the port number. So here is the MAC address now. If you see the media access the MAC address 192.168.0.1. This is a MAC address of these are the device. So these are the device now directly mapping to the port number. Now which is mapping to the port number of the 1034. If it is mapped to the port number of 1034, the data can be transferred. Whatever the data you are going to transferring, whatever the information you are going to transferring from the network 3 to network 1. Here is direct now we are transferring the network 1. Identified network 1 with the port number 1034. Now directly it is a mapping. MAC address is mapping to that the port number. By mapping this the port number now, direct the communication can be done. Here is that's why the specific the port number can be mapped. MAC address can be mapped. In a MAC address table, generally the switches, whatever the switches we are using in a MAC address at the table, these are the switches now forwarding the incoming frames. Whatever the incoming data frames are coming, that the data the frames can be forwarded. So that means here which is the forwarding. So OSI reference model, if you take the OSI reference model, in OSI reference model, sender side having 7 layers. Same as receiver side also having the 7 layers. Receiver side also having the 7 layers, 1 up to dash dash to 7 layers. Here also 1, 2 up to dash dash to 7 layers. Now total are the 7 layers. Here in a data transmission we are using the data link layer. Over the data link layer, the data can be transferred from one device to the forwarding the incoming frames. Whatever the frames are coming, so the data can be transferred in the form of the frames. In the form of the frame from the open system interconnection from one device to the another other device, the data can be transferred. That means here the table is dynamically updated as a device communicated over the network. Here this is the function of the MAC address table. Here generally in a MAC address table now, which are the concepts generally we are utilizing, that means now mapping and learning. Here the mapping the concepts, if you take the mapping concepts, these are the mapping concepts now, what it is doing now. These are the media access this is the control which address table which is storing the MAC address of each connected device. Whatever the devices are connecting, these are the MAC table which is having the address of the each and every device and the corresponding switch port. That means now, for example, it is the switch. take the switch. Now number of other devices can be connected. Number of other devices now which is having some MAC address. Next, these are the device. These are device 1. Device 2 also having some MAC address, which is also MAC address now, which is having some MAC address now. For example, 192.62.1.0. It is also having some other MAC address now. 192.72.0.1. Some the MAC medium access at the control address now. If we these with the help of this the MAC address now, which is the mapping can be done. Mapping this is the MAC address table. Now this is the table, MAC address table, which is MAC table. So in this is the MAC table which is storing the MAC address. Whatever the MAC address now which is having, the MAC address can be stored. MAC address 1 and up to dash number of the devices, how many devices you are using. So for all n device 1 MAC address and device 2 MAC address up to dash n number of other devices MAC address can be stored in a MAC in this MAC address table. Here is which is whatever the devices MAC address is stored, which is now connected to the corresponding switches. So it is a corresponding switch. So which will be stored to the connected to the corresponding switch and mapping to the corresponding switch. And here is learning. Learning means now when a switch receives the data frames, it records the source MAC address and the incoming port in its MAC address table. That means now, so these switch what will do now, which is receiving the data frames. The data frames are coming from the device 1. Number of the data frames are coming. So whatever the data frames are coming from the device 1, all the data frames can be recorded. And the incoming port in its the MAC address of the table. The port here, the MAC address, the table also that will be the, so whatever the addresses now we have stored, that will be the other recorded. And forwarding, if we take forwarding switch now, which by using this as a switch MAC address table to forwarding the frames to the correct port. That means now if we take this the MAC address table, this is the MAC address table which is having the MAC addresses, MAC address of device 1 and MAC address of device 2, which is having the number of the MAC addresses. Here is this is the switch. With help of this the switch now, this is the switch now which is the forwarding the frames to the correct port number. Here is this network having this some port number is a 1024 and another network which is having the port number is a 1034. Here these are the switch. Whatever the MAC addresses we have stored in a MAC address at the table, so it will be connected to the switches. These switches now over these other switches. Now the MAC address can be forwarded to the these 1024 port and 1034 other port. For that port now it will be forwarded. The switch what will do now? The switch sends the frames only to the appropriate port. That means whatever the communicating port is identified. Suppose for example this is the network 1. So this is a 1024 the port is identified. For that the appropriate identified as a port the data frames can be transferred. Data frames can be transferred to these other port. Okay, in this the port, in this the network the port here having the number of other devices. Now over with this the port number, that particular identified data frames can be transferred to the particular identified the device. That means here how can identify this other device means based on the IP address. Now which is this device 1 having some IP address, device 2 also having some IP address, device 3 also having some IP address. Based on this the IP address now which is the transferring the other data frames can be transferred to the based on this the IP address to particular other device. And the aging means now MAC address are kept in the table for a limited time only. Now whatever the MAC addresses now we are storing in a MAC address table, so it will be stored limited time only and removed if they are not used within the time bound. Now is bounded, the time can be bounded to this MAC address. If it is not utilized, so this MAC address are not utilized here, mapping to the so-and-so the port number or transferring the for communication, now it will be removed after some time delay. If the time bound is exceeded, now it will be removed. So this is about the aging, and this is about the data or the forwarding. Here that's why MAC addresses now it's tables to MAC address table, which is forwarding the frames, to the correct port. This is the important thing. The correct the port number. If the port number is correct, from that other port, the destination MAC, that means the destination MAC, that means the MAC address is mapped to the destination with help of the IP address. Destination means whatever the other device, is identifying, for that other device it will be the mapped. And structure of the MAC address table. Generally the MAC address table now, which is having MAC address field and a port field and a virtual LAN field. These three are the fields now which is having. Each row which is corresponding to the device MAC address and it is associated with the port number. That means now this is the MAC address. This MAC address is now associated with the port the post Ethernet 0. That is a port number 1. Is associated with the port number 1. And these are the MAC address now which is associated with the port number 2. Virtual LANs now, number of the virtual LAN number is 10. Here the virtual LAN number is the 20. And these IP address now, these are the MAC address now, it will be mapped to the post the Ethernet 3. Here is 01. 01 means now this is a port identifier. 01 means it is a port identifier and its structure depends on a specific device. Structure can be depends on a specific other device. So generally now 0 means now the first number which is refers to the slot or a module number, which is referring the slot or module number. Some switches and routers having the multiple slots. The switches now which is having the multiple slots where network modules can be inserted. That means here 1 means here the second number which is refers to the specific port within the slot or module. In this case, so it is the first port. It is the port 1. 1 is refers to the port, and 0 which is the first number now which is refers to the slot or module number. Some of the switches or some of the routers having the multiple slots where network modules can be inserted. So fast Ethernet 01, that means fast Ethernet 01 would be the first port on the module or slot of the switch. That means now it is capable of the transmitting the data at the speed of up to the 100 Mbps. And the types of the switches. Generally in a computer networking, 3 types of the switching the methods can be utilized for data transmission from one device to the another device over the same network or different networks. Message switching, circuit switching, packet switching are the 3 categories now the switches can be categorized. Again, the packet switching can be categorized as a datagram packet switching and a virtual circuit packet switching. Again, so which is categorized into 2 types. Here is, these are the switch network are circuit switched networks, packet switched networks, and message switched networks. Again, packet switched networks will be divided into 2 types. One is a datagram network, another one is a virtual circuit network. Here is circuit, packet and message switching now one by one to discuss. Message switching first. Message as a switching now, what it is doing with help of this as a switching now, the messages can be transferred over the other switch messages can be either transferred or the information can be either transferred. That means this is an older switching technique, because with that hasn't they become the absolute now. So in a message the switching the technology, the entire blocks or entire message is forwarded across the entire network. Here the total message or total information, so in the form of the blocks now, which is transferred at a time, can be the transferred, making it a very high. So it is a very high inefficient. Why? Because the entire message now we are the transferring. So when the efficiency will be a very highly efficient, how can avoid this? The inefficiency means now whenever the message is the total message is the transferring, whenever the message is divided into the number of the small other packets or small other data frames, now this high inefficiency can be reduced by dividing these the message into the number of other frames, number of data frames or number of other packets, by dividing this one. So the inefficiency can be reduced, the efficiency can be improved. But in the message switching, the switches can be transferred from source A to the destination B, shortest route. Shortest route, the technology, shortest route method here. Whatever which is searching the number of the paths, how many number of paths are possible from source A to the destination B. From that now, shortest path. What are the shortest path? For that shortest path, so by selecting the shortest the distance now, it will be forwarded the entire message at a time. That means the bulk message can be transferred at a time by using the message switches. Now in between these are all the switches. Switch 1, switch 2, switch 3, switch 4, switch 3, switch 5, switch 6. Number of other switches can be used between the source to other destination. Over these the switches now, the messages, the entire messages can be either transferred by identifying the shortest other distance between the source and destination. Circuit other switching. Circuit other switching now. So in this type of the switching, generally a connection is established between the source and destination. That means the connection receives the complete bandwidth of the network until the data is transferred completely. So this is the circuit or the switching. So diagrammatical presentation of the circuit switching. So this is switches. This is a switch A, switch B. Now which is establishing the connections between the source and destination. Suppose node 3 is considered as the source and node 2 is a destination. Only now which is establishing the connection. Establishing the connection to node 3 to node 3 to node 2 and transferring the data the packets. So from node 3 to node 2. So it is acting as a source and other destination. Here is packet switching. Suppose the data is transferred over these other switches, over the number of other switches, the data is transferred to the destination, the bulk amount of data if you transferred. So that is a very high inefficient. That is very complicated. That's why the complexity can be reduced by packet switching concepts. That means now, so which is divided the message or data frame or packet into the small number of packets. So this is a one message data frame. These are the message the data frame having the bulk amount of the information. So that's why now which is a switching. That means now which is divided into the two parts. This part is transferred switch 1 to switch 2 and this one is transferred from switch 1 to the switch 3. Again it is partitioned. Packet switching, again it is divided into switch 1, it is transferred to from S2, S2, S3 and S2 to S4 is these switch packets are again further divided. Similarly here 2 is transferred like this and 3 is 3 and 4. 3 and 4 is transferred. 4 is the coming from S2 to S3, and 2 is the coming from S1 to S3. Combinedly, 4 and 3 packets can be either transferred to S3 to S5. Again here what we are doing now, S4 to S5, now data can be either transferred, again it will be either combined. Now data can be transferred S5 to S6. For final, whatever the messages now you are transferring, that other messages can be either received. So this is the packet as a switching, and datagram packet switching. So data frame is taken as a individual entry. They are processed separately. Here the no connection is established in a datagram. Datagram means now without establishment is a wireless communication. It can be used. Virtual circuit packet switching, generally it is a switching. A logical connection can be established between the source and destination. Source and destination logical connection can be established. Here, conclusion of this the switching the technology. Switching is a fundamental networking process that enabling the exchanging of data between the devices over the same network or different networks by efficient directing data packets to the correct destination. Correct destination can be identified with help of this IP address plus the port number of the network. The correct destination can be identified. Switches helps maintain the smooth and organized communication, which is ensuring that multiple devices can share the same network without interference. So this is about the switches. And the textbooks for this one is a Data Communication and Networking, Tata McGraw, 5th edition, and Andrew S. Tenenbaum. So Computer Networks, 5th edition. So these two are the textbooks for the switching the technology. Thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.